Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Wherever you are in the world today, you're on the new way. And the new way, we take everything we know and or new and weigh it again. My guest today is Gavin Campbell. Uh, I don't know much about Gavin, and so we're going to meet for the first time and really talk about things. And this is what Grim Grizz would call a fringe encounter, a first time meeting between minds that will connect and go places. Good morning, Gavin.
Morning, Lenny. Thanks for having me here.
Yeah, if you would take a moment to tell everybody who you are and what your background is, and feel free to ask me any question that you want. I'm a scientist and a chemist and get to deep thinking, get out there. And I've seen a lot of your videos, and those are two things I can guarantee I've seen is deep thinking and getting out there.
Yeah. Uh, so like 90-second, 3-minute version of Who Am
Sure,
I?
yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
a little bit more than an elevator talk, but not not the purpose of the show.
Okay. Cool. Both of my parents were public school educators for like about 20 years each. Um, I have a brother and sister, and I grew up in Anchorage, Alaska. Uh, I went to college after school. I went to a therapeutic boarding school for 14 months, all boys, in the middle of Oregon. Um, then started college at 17 and kind of bounced in and out of that. um, I was studying for nuclear fusion and got about 3 years into that and didn't finish college and haven't since. Um, I've run pot farms down in California and worked in the marijuana industry for a while. I played poker for a living for a couple of years. And now I reside in Homer, Alaska. And I am trying to find my place online. So that includes a lot of possible psychotechnology and social change opportunities.
Sounds very reasonable.
Mhm.
Um, I've been involved in education for a long time. It is with great respect that I treat your parents being public school teachers.
Mhm.
At this point, I'm not sure the value of public school. I don't know what is actually happening there, but I do know that I was involved in working with high school students 20 years ago, and the schools were collectively very anti outsider coming in and doing anything with their students. And I worked with middle school students teaching math and science, and we taught protocols on how the government collects bugs in an entomology study or water quality monitoring in chemistry or measuring a stand in a forest. And we got worked in conjunction with a zoo, had classes on Saturdays, and trained students to run these protocols, then took them out in some outings so that they could get in the wetsuit and go into the water and collect the bugs. And they had a
Mhm.
real good time of it. It was a very successful program, but a whole bunch of different factors influenced it and blew it apart. They passed No Child Left Behind, which I sometimes call No Child Gets Ahead because it really stifled programs for the talented and gifted students.
Mm-hmm.
But solving the dilemmas of education requires looking at the knowledge base and finding out whether it's true or not.
Mm-hmm.
Um, are you when you were studying nuclear fusion? Was that based in chemistry or physics?
Physics.
Okay. What do you suppose about cold fusion as a mechanism that might happen in cells?
I mean, I know a lot about the history of it, but I don't have enough technical knowledge to say anything about what's the probability of that.
I I wonder if when I learned chemistry, they just said that fusion was off limits. It doesn't happen. But somehow the body does seem to, human bodies at least, and animal bodies, make elements they don't get from their diet. They seem to have them in just the supply they need.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot going on that I question in the science. In the world of academic science in universities,
Mm-hmm.
that's a tough world. That changed a lot in the 1990s. And
Mm-hmm.
so when I got my degree, I actually learned chemistry, but when I went out to try and apply it, I found that the real world doesn't really know anything about chemistry. They leave it to the chemists. So a lot of bright people make things up as they go on the cutting edge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, a little bit more background. My dad actually, after he finished his teaching stint, he went into the what do you call it? Um, uh, Being an administrative work, and he was helping to uh, implement the No Child Left Behind thing. And so I know a couple things about that. It homogenizes the child's experience of the classroom, as far as I can tell, uh, which is uh, the exact opposite of what we need today, which is highly specialized because people are becoming more and more individualized. They're recognizing their true nature. They're becoming free of monotony, or they would if they were allowed to have the circumstances to actually flourish. So, um, and we need that because it takes every sort of person to figure out the kind of problems that we're looking at on a societal scale. Really, the issues are unprecedented. So,
Well, I really think that working in groups of one on human scale
mhm,
means each individual needs to be heard whenever they have an idea or a thought on how to do things, or should
mhm,
at least be consulted when somebody's doing something for them.
mhm,
And in the systems that we've built now, they're all top down, ranging outward. And what we see coming is coming from the ground level,
yeah,
group of one. We want to attune our energy into the Schumann resonance of Earth and look at what's going on non human scales. And what you see when you wander alone in the woods and look around is quite a bit different than what they might give you the impression you're seeing. And then on the other hand, if you look at everything that they've told us from the news media, the education, the entertainment industry, and that, it all seems to be falling apart. and it doesn't fit for individuals. It expects individuals to homogenize, like you said.
Yeah.
And so I think that maybe starting from each individual and having conversations like the one we're having here are a very good way to start at looking at something new, where it's run more along the lines of Fibonacci, where the two ones are individual humans and the whole group of all humans. And expecting the whole group of all humans to do anything is a fallacy. It's never going to happen. It's hard enough to hold together a group of three, nonetheless, a group of everybody. But, right now the world works by steamrolling everybody, and we can't even hold together a decent narrative. I look at the world and I'd rather go inside my own head than be out in the world as it's described today.
Mm-hmm. I mean, there's nothing. The trouble that I'm finding more and more is that when you have, and this has been said before, it's just now I'm having the first person experience of it, where you recognize something fundamental about the world. You see what the truth of the matter is, and you see through some kind of bullshit, right? And when you call that for what it is, similar to what you were saying within the classroom, your experience within school, where you come in and there's something that you'd like to change about it, and you meet the resistance, right? Most humans, in my experience thus far in my life, are fairly resistant to change. That doesn't really go over well with them. And a lot of that, as far as I can tell, has to do with lack of curiosity and maybe some kind of exercise in their imagination. So I hear what you're saying about the one-on-one, which to me would entail a powerful practice in listening, which I imagine really would evoke something about the curiosity process, to being highly attuned to another person and moving away from how we can. It appears like in a really busy city, you can move through the world and mimic the behavior, pay enough attention in order to pass as like, I was there, I was processing what was being said, I filled all the check marks that societally, it's socially acceptable to be in this manner, but you really weren't listening, you really weren't engaged. And we have to move back into that present moment of immediate experience, as Terrence puts it, and become really attuned with like what's going on now, because that's where curiosity comes from. And I'm going to tie it in once more, which is you were talking about the body and how it seems to be able to create just the right amount of, these compounds, and where did they come from? I'm finding it miraculous. We're talking about, in my mind, I'm evoking something like the quantum foam. How does anything bubble up out of reality? Where does it all come from? Because it seems to come from essentially nothing. And where is that? The experience of curiosity, where is the source of that? What evokes that? And how does one feel that directly? Because it doesn't, if we neglect it long enough, it doesn't seem to be like, you don't feel it. You don't have that. And we have to become more attuned to be able to access that sort of level of curiosity.
I think that humans come with a fine tuning mechanism, sort of a resonance of forms, that if
Mhm.
they believe something, they strengthen their resonance with it. And if they disbelieve something, they sort of fall away, they don't resonate with it, and it runs in a different direction. But that each human being resonates at a different frequency, and that the combination of frequencies in a conversation like this is way different in wavelength than our internal frequency wavelength that we hold ourselves at. But I think that we narrow our vision when we say wavelength to just visible light wavelengths. And
Mhm.
in the continuum, everything is a wavelength from the 0 point as a standing wave to infinite dimension. And I wonder if our description based on the belief of what we were taught might not be planted in us by the mechanism of our learning over the last, well, 66 years for me.
Mhm.
I I wonder if I question what I know, but take what I've learned from firsthand experience as fact, that I can buy into chemistry at a base level that matter exchanges. And if it's over here, it's got to be over there when you finish. And the form of that matter will change.
Yeah.
But I'm no longer convinced that the world plays by the game of physics as we were taught physics. And I'm convinced that there are some things that we are not told or taught go on very commonly and would fill in some missing links if we had that information.
Yeah. It I don't know what to say other than that seems patently obvious to me at this point. And I'm wondering, I mean, you're familiar with Donald Hoffman, just for you've heard his like an hour of him talk or 2 hours of him talk?
Donald Hoffman.
Yeah.
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Well, his whole spiel is basically we have a headset on right now, and we're we're interfacing with the useful frames of reality. It's not to say that his research is showing that evolution doesn't select for what's absolutely true. It selects for what's useful. And so
Okay.
we're looking at essentially a metaphor. Everything in our experience is metaphorical, essentially, like in that sort of way, and it's not literally metaphorical. So and he's there's so between the amplitudehedron and the there's something isotopes, I think is the terms that he uses. What the physicists that he's working for have found objects beyond space-time. He's saying that there's this range of what space-time is, which is 10 to the minus 43 and 10 to the something. And that's
89?
what's that?
89?
Possibly. Okay. And he's saying that's the window of what our current physics can hold. That it's everything that we do, anything that we do in the relative world is just a model. And so this model, space-time, breaks when you go past that or past that, and it's no longer useful. So,
Oh, it's not useful as it is right now here in the way they describe it.
well, I mean, I see airplanes fly every day, and so in that sense, it is useful for something in my mind, anyway.
Time is a construct,
Uh huh.
and I don't think we have it right.
It might
And
be.
I think it is keeping us in a state of perpetual human disarray.
Mm-hmm.
And that if we stay on clocks and calendars and all this stuff that is canned, we get canned life, and that's not what nature selects for. It selects for diversity, it selects for something different to happen. So we've got a pool of people who are ready for something different,
Yeah.
but it seems to me that the many worlds theory holds,
Mm-hmm.
and that there are we are characters on many different worlds interacting in many different ways, but those worlds are all in on different scales, so you
Mm-hmm.
can never run into yourself for that. But when you have been selected in the narrative you find yourself in, maybe that comes on a larger scale, and nature gives you more opportunity to interact and change and express the novelty. And as it goes up the ladder of novelty, you get more and more time, but it's all normalized back to human existence.
Yeah.
So you are in your body as you with, say, an 80-year life period. Whether that 80-year life period takes a microsecond or 1,000 centuries, you have no way of telling from the perspective of you. It still seems like you doing things. So sometimes we start doing things that are odd, and the universe really likes it. But to allow us to pursue that goal of oddity,
Mm-hmm.
it shifts us out of the comfortable place we were and puts us into a new environment.
Mm.
It seems to me that humans change their environment completely every 14 years, but in cycles of 7 years. And
Mm.
so it overlaps and rolls, and it's almost like it's done seasonally. A spring follows a winter, and the winter follows the fall, and the fall follows the summer, and the summer follows the spring. And so when you come into life, whatever the prevailing pattern is, changes about every 20 years and rotates through the four seasons. So to me, we are at the end of a winter that has taken us from World War II in 20-year jumps, so to speak, to where we find ourselves now, which some people will think is the brink of World War III. And some people like me have to laugh because that's not my reality at all.
Not me either. I literally find that to be a joke. um, well, I'm struck because there seems to be a linearity to what you're describing. Would you say that's true?
Not linear so much as cyclic.
Hmm.
I think it works in cycles, and the cycles are embedded in cycles, but that's just my scientific background imposing frequency on energy,
Hmm.
because E equals hc over lambda.
Hmm.
Was an
Well,
old okay.
yeah, my intuition is, so I'm 34. It's tricky for me to say for sure. Well, I should ground this in first. I cannot verify that anything in history actually occurred. I mean,
I'll agree
it's
with you.
right. We have this solipsism, like weirdness thing that's always lurking, right? They're beyond my immediate experience. I can't verify it. Okay. As I'm looking at the world and in my direct experience, specifically within the last 5 years, I'm feeling like things are quote unquote speeding up. So I don't know if cycles is part of that, where, you know, the cycles are happening faster in a chronological sense, or they're just like the pattern is becoming fractally like imprinted on a smaller and smaller scale, essentially. But I'm getting the sense that things are not slowing down. And so I wonder about that constantly. I have a lot of stuff to say about it, but I wonder about it.
Well, I think time varies on scale,
Mm-hmm.
and that a second might not be a constant unit of time, but might vary in the perception of each individual. So
Mm-hmm.
some people can get more time within their second than other people. And I'm struck by the idea that there's a lot of people in this world who I'll call NPCs, non-player characters.
Yeah.
They just they're there, they're doing stuff, but I don't think there's any cognitive thought process behind it.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe they're there because the world changed and there's no real mechanism for just making people disappear. So they've got to be removed from the system in another way. And most of the people have already been removed from the system. We haven't been. So we're dealing with a lot of people whose essence is here, but they're not doing much. And you got to work around them rather than through them.
Mm-hmm.
Although I do wonder how much of what we have now has been built by the media and just never happened. What if they had AI when they introduced television in the late 50s, actually started producing stuff for people to watch that was not real, and none of the history that we've learned by watching it on television has actually happened in reality?
It's another one that's lurking that I simply can't confirm. If we made contact with it, okay, I'll talk about it in this way. I see, given what I know about how like large language models work and the progression of the GPUs and CPUs and whatnot, I see no evidence to think that in 1970 AI existed. Now, separate from that, did an alien come in contact with planet Earth and government covered it up and they have access to some kind of technology that they're just won't say anything? That is possible. And I can't, it's similar to the solipsism thing. I can't verify it. I
Yeah,
have no
it's the
way of knowing.
Roswell theory, but how did we get to the moon if we had to go through the Van Allen belts?
Oh, I don't know about it.
Okay.
I don't know.
Just one of those little things that it's always those little things that somebody notices that make it so that there's some sort of major error in what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that I think that sometimes our thinking needs to be taken from a different perspective that isn't grown through the way we've been taught to think. I sure would like to talk to some people who weren't formally educated in how things work, that have figured out how things work, to hear how they think things work, because we're given stuff to work with and programmed from a very early age. And if you're a bright, intelligent youth and can't sit still in your chair to listen to somebody talk at you,
Yeah.
nowadays they punish you. But it used to be they took you out of the class and gave you extra reading or something to just keep you from disturbing the pace of the rest of the class so you could be more educated than your compatriots. But there's a lot going on that I think is mind control
Yeah.
and behind the scenes stuff where somebody really knows what's going on, but they're not telling?
I'm increasingly coming to that. I mean, I what you just described is very similar to my experience of the world. I was constantly reprimanded for not sitting still and paying attention in class, and it was laughable how remedial class was for me. So, and proceedingly, my adult life has been primarily figuring things out by myself. You know, like playing poker for a living was a very entrepreneurial and highly like attention oriented experience. I was fascinated with the psychology of human beings and like witnessing that firsthand and getting these inside scoops of like what's the underlying like reality like, where the good old boys are all sitting around a table and money is being passed around, and you know there's infinite insights that you can gain in these spaces. And then like marijuana was illegal in California. That's an entirely different form of like figuring it out. So uh, that I mean, I do think I qualify in that regard to what you're looking for. And nothing about what you're saying is like striking me as like, well, that's outrageous. I mean, it's all just the thing that I have to keep going back to is I don't say I believe in anything because it's pointless. I either know it's true or I don't. And in between is I don't know. And there could be, I can assess probabilities to things, but at the end of the day, I can't confirm.
Assessing probabilities is like playing poker, and the Monte Carlo method of statistical analysis and gaming to find things out
Hmm.
really is appropriate these days. If we could use the format of gaming and have live action role play learning environments where some of the characters are cued into what's going on and they bring along a number of other characters to bring them up to speed. I think interactive learning really works well, especially when there are levels of learning to to go through. Are you familiar with Civilization, the computer game?
I know of it. Yeah.
I played it through its first and second versions
Hmm.
and really was into it. I mean, that's where I spent my time.
Yeah.
And understanding how the history underpinned the growth of civilization in an extremely simplistic manner to get to the point where to win the game you had to launch a ship to Alpha Centauri.
Mm.
And it was before graphics were real good and before the skill level was more in thought rather than in being able to push a character in the interactivity.
Hmm.
But it was one of those games that we brought my homeschooled son up with. And I think his perspective of history is way different from looking at things than than other people have. So it's not surprising that the information base is changing. And we have to look at it and figure out what information are people my age carrying along as baggage that we don't even realize is not correct, that is affecting your generation and younger. You're the same age as my older son.
Mm.
So this conversation could be between me and him, but our realities are different, and I don't invade his reality without something to really talk about.
Mm. Well, I mean, I'm hesitant to say this, and I'm going to, but I'm not confident that this is like the most useful thing I could say. So your analogy to moving around certain people who are kind of on autopilot or NPC mode, I'm coming closer to that experience. I mean, there's some amount of people who I don't know, beyond the pressure of reality getting stranger and stranger, and the pressure cooker, people just being like, oh fuck, it's so awful, it's so unbelievable, I simply cannot hold on to these beliefs anymore. I have to let go of what I thought reality was, because it's not lining up anymore, and I feel like shit, and I really don't know what's going on. And that's about how I think this plays out in quite reasonably. Is you can shelter yourself forever and ever and try and live off your retirement and sip lemonade and go to the football games and blah blah blah. The world is going to keep on changing, and if you don't update your model, you're gonna find out that you're fucked at some point in time. And so my action plan does not include trying to change anyone's mind any longer. I tried with my dad in particular. He was my subject of trying to refine, hey, if I actually just communicated better, that's what the problem is. I'm not communicating effectively. I spent 3 years and hundreds of hours. He ain't changing his mind. There's not a goddamn thing that I can say. So I'm just going to let reality play itself out, and he'll figure it out at some point.
Yeah, you really may not permissibly drop a tab of acid into his coffee and watch how his mind changes. That would
Exactly.
not be proper in the rules of the game as we've defined it.
Yeah, exactly right. So they're talking about, so my imagination just, I mean, it really knows no bounds. When you say like, oh, we need to update like how we interpret physics, again, I'm drawn back into like, it's so obvious. And there's a quote that I'm forgetting who said it, but it's just so appropriate, which is, not only is reality stranger than we suppose, it's stranger than we can suppose. And it's just like, and before we talked on this call, you were talking about like, there's been no scientific breakthroughs. I'm becoming drawn more and more toward, we've reached the human's threshold to understand reality. It's we're not endowed with the tools physiologically, I'm talking about our brain, maybe mostly, to understand reality and like much further. We might chip away. You're not going to get a runaway LeBron James or Michael Jordan or Kobe. There's not going to be someone who suddenly is 30% better than any of them. The
Except
human
for
limit.
Wemby.
What's that?
Except for the guy Wemby, who's now on the Spurs, who's 7'6" and had a triple double the other day with blocks instead of assists.
It's nuts. Yeah. I mean, it's impressive, obviously. I wouldn't say that's 30% better. That might be, 3 or 5% better, maybe.
It's stretching the threshold. And it's kind of interesting you mentioned that, because in a way, since my lifetime when I've been cognizant,
Hmm.
things have been narrowing and narrowing and narrowing to where you're locked in such a narrow box in your thought anymore that
Yeah.
you can't push out of the system. But perspective is such that if somebody can kick me ideas of where chemistry is broken,
Hmm.
I can't see where chemistry might be broken because I'm embedded in chemistry thought. And
Yeah.
if I can't change it to have a balanced equation of reactants going to products, or it doesn't follow a pH type continuum
Yeah.
where the amount of acidity is an order of magnitude for each unit,
Yeah.
a log scale.
Yeah.
And by looking at things in different ways, I realized that human sight is very, very narrow.
It's tight.
And
Yeah.
human scale is a quantum reality because you can't subdivide a single human into anything smaller than a single human without destroying the essence of that human life. I'm
Mm.
not my mind, I'm not my brain, but what if this whole carbon skeleton that humans think is so important and generates everything we do is
Hmm.
really run by the water and not the carbon skeleton at all? That the carbon skeleton is an erector set and the consciousness is in the water, not in the brain. And the process of biology in biohumanity is to break down the chemicals and have it so that we are 0 point energy generators using food as a fuel, but really by using the temperature of the water in our bodies as an energy control ramp.
Possibly. I mean, I'll talk. I'm struck by the metaphysics of what you described, which is you're finding this reality narrowing. I think that that has a lot of strong pointers to me about. Terence McKenna has the metaphor of the marble rolling in the bowl.
Okay.
Have you heard that? Yeah.
I
I mean, yeah. Hmm.
I did my drugs before I really knew who Terence McKenna was. And by the
Hmm.
time he came onto my radar screen, I was embroiled in the working world and no longer going out on adventures.
Yeah.
Sometime around 2000, I freed myself from the working world and began to go back out into places where I could go and have sampled a lot of different hallucinogens looking for what hits me right. And peyote is the one that I have found that I currently like the most. But when I get out there and use any hallucinogen and start thinking about reality, I don't have that model of Terence McKenna or Don Juan or others that a lot of people in the psychedelic world think about, because my initial dealing with it was before I was educated to even think about it. And then I had to quit almost cold turkey because I needed to pay attention to getting my degree within the time limit before I timed out and had wasted the time without getting the degree.
Hmm.
Now I wonder the value of degrees. I look at the world and a degree just allows you to play the game at the next level up, but the level ups beyond grad school are such that you don't have free will. In fact, sometime we'll have to talk about free will, but it'll have to be another time because we're coming up to 3/4 of an hour we've spent now. And I don't want to talk for more than an hour because an audience just stops listening and tunes out after a while.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with Chizzy?
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about the idea of being able to organize collective human intelligence?
It's going to require AI. And what I suspect is a brain computer interface to scale it.
Do you find that worrisome at all?
No.
Okay. It seems to me that the image that I have of AI is quite a bit different from the image that people who actually know what AI is about know. And so I'm probably more representative of those people who are throwing sticks in the machine and saying, oh, this will never work, because I'm not quite understanding how AI really works. But it's basically somebody writes a computer program and then the AI takes over and begins writing itself.
How long would you want me to give my understanding? Because I could explain it pretty thoroughly.
How long do you need?
The basic thing will take about 90 seconds.
Go for it.
So you take a massive dump of data. There's going to be some amount of signal, some amount of noise. And what the fine-tuning process of building a large language model, for example, is trying to cut out as much noise, which would be equivalent to like distruth or some kind of relative, something that will misguide the model. And they try and give a lot of weight to the things that are going to be really, really true. So that if you keep on, this is the human feedback process where you have a human who's going through and sifting through a lot of its training set and saying, whoa, no, that's going to be, the harmful things that happen on images, and every single image is a doctor and male, so that when it generates images, everything that says doctor corresponds to male, for example, and trying to move those things out of historical precedence and into some kind of an alignment process. Okay, so once you've trained a model on this massive data set, when you describe something, when you're talking through it, has this massive network for every single word. When you say it just brings up this massive context. Kitchen, context. Cup, context. And it's similar to if you put the cloth table or the cloth over the table, you take and you pull it, and you take kitchen and you pull it, and you amalgamate each piece kind of pulls towards a unified way of describing the sentence, for example. So I walked to the store yesterday and it took me 5 minutes. Ding, 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 ding. And then it has this amalgamation of what it approximates that you just communicated. And if you have high signal, it will understand that quite well, actually. And the more they can refine the model, the more, accurate understanding it's going to render.
How
does that line up?
It fits in a bell-shaped curve, where you take the bell-shaped curve, and as the language model is refined, it gets taller and includes more, but the outliers keep cleaving off, so that the realm of error keeps getting narrower and narrower. And so as you refine things and the error gets to the point where there really is no error in the mechanism, but the information fed to the AI wasn't correct necessarily from the beginning, I can
Mm-hmm.
see. I think we're talking about everybody having their own personal AI interpreter, as opposed to there being an AI controller doing things. But to me, when I hear AI and I think about it, I go back to iRobot and
Mm-hmm.
the rest of the robots and what Isaac Asimov wrote in the 1950s as my model for how things could work. And the three laws of
Mm-hmm.
robotics pretty much could apply to AI these days. You should never kill a human if you have a choice, all sorts of different things. I don't remember it enough to know it well,
Mm-hmm.
but we're coming to the top of an hour. Is there anything you would like to say to the audience, which at this point has grown to 8 people?
Oh. Um, I don't do particularly well with broad questions like that.
Okay.
I reach out to me on Twitter if you have any questions, because if you have a specific question that you felt called to ask, my handle is exactly what I have here on the screen, GFRPAAC. That's about the most useful thing I can do is talk to people one-on-one like you do.
Yeah, one on one conversations in my group theory really, really works. And the evolution of sociochemistry is such where it's gone in fits and spurts. But I really think that the mathematics of chemistry applies to sociology through the area of group theory, where in chemistry, group theory has to do with the spatial arrangement of atoms in space to form molecules and how those chemical bonds separate from each other and form. And it seems like chemical bonds and human bonds are very, very similar in abstract fractal ways, so that small groups of people should form groups very much like small groups of molecules. But when you get 5 or more people and you start working up from there, you almost have to reset it back to a group of one. But learning how to be a group of one and having a fringe encounter, which is a first time conversation between minds where you can actually get on the same page and see how things are done, is always a great way of introducing more people to the collective group. And I'd like to do a moment of branding and remember that everyone who's here is a member of the Virtually Not Alone network, which means that even though you're alone, there's people to talk to and resources to tap into. And if we're going to create a structure from human scale that operates to the benefit of all humans, it can't be a top down management decision made by people who aren't even elected. But that whole election system is kind of dopey and not out there at all. So,
Mhm.
thank you very much. And it's been a pleasure talking with you. Hang on, and you and I will talk about an after party. But I'm going to say goodbye to all the folks watching and thank you all for attending.
Thank you.